What if standing for truth cost you everything? What kind of faith keeps going even when the outcome is clear? And how can someone show peace in the middle of chaos? The moment Stephen finished speaking, the atmosphere changed completely. What had been tension turned into rage. The leaders who stood before him were no longer listening. Their faces hardened. Their reactions were no longer controlled. The truth they had just heard did not lead them to reflection. It pushed them into fury. They were deeply offended, not just by the words, but by what those words revealed. Because sometimes truth does not feel like clarity. Sometimes it feels like exposure. And when people feel exposed, they often respond not with humility, but with resistance. Stephen stood there, fully aware of the shift. He could see it. He could feel it. The moment was no longer safe. There was no misunderstanding about what was coming next. And yet, he did not step back. He did not try to soften what he had said. He did not attempt to escape the moment. Instead, something unexpected happened. In the middle of rising anger, Stephen looked beyond the situation. He saw something greater. He was filled with a vision, a clarity that went deeper than the chaos around him. And in that moment, he spoke again, not to defend himself, not to argue, but to share what he saw. He described a vision of heaven open, of a presence beyond the visible, of something real, powerful, and undeniable. But the crowd could not hear it. Not because the words were unclear, but because their hearts were closed. They covered their ears. They refused to listen. And then everything escalated. They rushed at him. No longer a discussion, no longer a trial, just raw, uncontrolled reaction. They dragged him out of the city, away from the center, away from the place of judgment, into a space where they could act without restraint. And there the final moment began. They picked up stones, not small gestures, but heavy, deliberate actions. This was not impulsive, it was intentional. And as the first stones were thrown, Stephen did something that defines this entire story. He prayed, not for escape, not for rescue, but for something far deeper. He called out, entrusting his spirit beyond the moment. He acknowledged something greater than what was happening. And then even more powerful, he looked at those around him, the ones throwing the stones, the ones filled with anger, the ones who had rejected everything he said. And instead of responding with bitterness, he responded with forgiveness. He asked that this act not be held against them. That kind of response is not natural. It goes against every instinct. Because when we are hurt, we want justice. When we are attacked, we want defense. When we are wronged, we want acknowledgement. But Stephen chose something different. He chose grace. In the middle of pain, in the middle of injustice, in the middle of a moment where he had every reason to react differently. And that choice speaks louder than anything else in this story, because it reveals the depth of his faith, not just in words, but in action, in response, in the way he handled the most extreme situation. This moment forces us to confront a difficult question. What does it mean to truly believe? Is it about what we say, what we know, what we understand, or is it about how we respond when everything is taken away? Stephen's life answers that question. Faith is not proven in comfort. It is revealed in pressure. It is seen clearly when circumstances are at their worst, because that is when the foundation is tested. That is when what is inside becomes visible. And in Stephen's case, what was inside was unshakable. He was not defined by fear. He was not controlled by anger. He was not consumed by the moment. He remained grounded, focused, aligned with something beyond the situation. There is also something deeply powerful about the presence of witnesses in this moment. People stood by, watching, participating, some actively involved, others observing, and among them was a young man named Saul. He approved of what was happening. He watched. He witnessed the entire scene, and though nothing changed in that moment for him, the impact of what he saw would not disappear. Because moments like this leave an imprint. They plant something, even if it is not visible right away, even if it takes time to surface. The response of Stephen created a contrast that could not be ignored. Violence met with peace, hatred met with forgiveness, chaos met with calm. And that contrast has power, because it forces reflection. It creates questions. It challenges assumptions. This is why the story matters, not just because of what happened, but because of how it happened. Stephen did not fight back. He did not defend himself in the traditional sense. He did not try to change the outcome. He stayed true to who he was, to what he believed, to how he chose to respond. And that consistency is what defines his legacy. This story is often difficult to process because it confronts us with the reality that doing what is right does not always lead to easy outcomes. Sometimes it leads to resistance, to rejection, to loss. And that challenges the way we think about success. Because success is often measured by results, by comfort, by stability. But this story offers a different perspective. Success is about alignment, about staying true to what matters, about responding with integrity, no matter the situation. Stephen did not win in the traditional sense, but he remained faithful. And that is what gives this moment its power. It also invites us to examine our own responses. When we face conflict, how do we react? When we are misunderstood, how do we respond? When we are hurt, do we hold on to resentment or choose something different? Because the way we respond in those moments shapes everything. It shapes our character, our relationships, our impact. And while we may not face situations as extreme as Stephen's, the principles still apply. In everyday life, we encounter moments of tension, moments where we are tested, moments where we have the choice to react or to respond, to escalate or to bring calm, to hold on to anger or to release it. And those choices matter. They define the kind of person we become. They influence the environment around us. They create ripple effects that go beyond what we can see. Stephen's story is not just about a moment in history. It is about a mindset, a way of living, a way of responding. It challenges us to think differently about strength, because strength is often associated with power, with control, with dominance. But here, strength looks different. It looks like peace under pressure. It looks like forgiveness in the face of harm. It looks like clarity in the middle of chaos. And that kind of strength is rare, but it is also transformative, because it changes the way we interact with the world. It shifts the way we handle difficulty. It creates space for something deeper than reaction, something more intentional, more aligned, more meaningful. There is also a deeper layer to this story about perspective. Stephen did not focus on what was happening to him. He focused on what was beyond it. He saw something greater, and that perspective gave him peace, even in the most intense moment. This reminds us that perspective shapes experience. When we focus only on the immediate, we can become overwhelmed, consumed by the situation. But when we lift our perspective, when we connect to something larger, we find stability, we find clarity, we find strength. And that does not remove the difficulty, but it changes how we move through it. Stephen's final moments were not defined by fear. They were defined by faith, by trust, by a sense of purpose that went beyond the situation. And that is what makes this story so powerful. It is not about the ending. It is about the response, the consistency, the alignment, the courage to remain true, no matter the cost. And that is the invitation for us, to build that kind of foundation, to develop that kind of response, to live in a way that reflects something deeper than circumstance, because life will bring challenges, moments we cannot control, situations that test us. But in those moments, we still have a choice in how we respond, a choice in what we hold on to, a choice in who we become. Stephen chose peace, he chose forgiveness, he chose faith, and through that he left a message that continues to speak, a message that challenges us, that inspires us, that invites us to live differently, not based on what happens to us, but based on what we carry within us. Thank you for watching this video. If this message touched your heart, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who needs strength and inspiration today.